Man, I got a lot of comments about this coffee mug. Y'all think it's the biggest coffee mug in the entire world. Let me tell you, it's not. It's just the angle of the camera lens, right? But I'm going to include it in the video today. Well, I am not much of a political person, but this subject needs to be covered. It does. Protesting. I despise it. At least I do this day and age. So today, I've done a little research. Not that it needed to be done, but I wanted to have the facts right about why you don't see it in rural areas like where I live, or places like in Iowa or Nebraska. You just don't see it. You see it in the big cities. And it can be from both political parties, but 90% of it is from one. Man, I tell you, I'd be willing to say that most of the people that are out there protesting never even voted. That's just my guess. So let's get into some of the reasons. And I write stuff down. Yes, I want to be able to tell you what I got on my mind. Now, let's go over some of in my opinion, protesting is a waste of time, usually, because it doesn't get anything accomplished, ever. Very few times have big protests changed any kind of policy or decisions, but it has happened. I mean, we've had the civil rights movement in the 60s, okay? That happened in the South mostly. The Vietnam War, now, I'm too young to remember them protests. I was alive, but I was too young. I can, do I think we had any business over there? No. But at the same time, people shouldn't have been spitting on the veterans that were coming home, because most of them didn't have a choice. That's just a whole nother ball game. Women's suffrage movement in the early 1900s to get women's voting rights, that was one that most likely had an outcome that was for what they were protesting. But then there are some George Floyd protests. And this is what it says. It sparked reforms in many cities, bans on chokeholds, changes to police funding, defunding police, and led to high-profile policy discussions at federal and state level. Well, I'm not going to get into that, but the things that it changed, they're not working. Defunding the police, that did not work. Did not work at all. And how any level-headed human would think removing law and order would make things better, I can't figure that one out. So let's get rid of that. Why do we have less protest in smaller towns, counties with low populations? Well, before I get started, let me tell you this. This may shock you. My county, which is in about central west Arkansas, in 2020 voted 70% for Barack Obama. That's right. You would think, well, them southern rednecks, they're always red. Nope. On my road, which is 13 and a half miles long, there are 70%, this is the last time I checked, 70% of the people, the residents that live on my road, are registered Democrats. The difference is that party has changed. It's kind of switched. It's not the same Democrats that there are today. They're not out there protesting for what those Democrats are doing. If they're even voting, there is a big majority that are not registered in either party. I would be one of them, okay? I have voted on both sides. It's been a long time for one side, but I have voted. Have I voted in every election? No. When I was young, I had other things to do. The younger people don't tend to vote as much as the older people. I know when I go to vote, it's all old people, man. They're the ones that care the most. But then the protests are all the young people. But are they voting? That would be an interesting thing to find out if they are voting. Because if you're not voting, you don't have a right to say anything, right? That's the way my feeling is. Do they have felonies? They can't vote? What is the situation there? Low population density is one of the reasons. We're going to go back to why you don't see these protests here. Low population density. Well, yeah, you got less people. It says fewer people per square mile makes it hard to gather a critical mass of people. Number two, tight-knit social networks. People in these small rural areas all pretty much, they know they got to live together. They tend to think alike. If it doesn't affect them, their county, their town, their street, whatever, they're not going to get involved. If they like the way things are going, why change it? And we just don't get involved in the big city. We don't have the big city issues, so we're not going to get involved with that. We could care less, okay, about a bunch of men wearing purses out there with high water pants, screaming about something. A man, I don't think a man should be at a protest in the first place. That's a woman's thing. They like to protest. There are certain things a man could protest about, but to me, it's crybaby stuff. You're a crybaby. I know, I'm going to stir something up. Political homogeneity, whatever that is. Rural areas often lean heavily toward one political ideology, creating a social environment where, views are less tolerated and protests are seen as disruptive or disloyal. Now, like I said, where I live, you got a mixture of all the parties. But they all have one thing in common, and that's that we got to live together, okay? People's political views here, people keep that to themselves, and it's better that they do. We do get a lot of people that are moving here from the northern places, and some of the troublemaker cities like LA, New York, Chicago. Those have always been known as the troublemakers, and they still are. And people just, it's just not necessary here. Limited media attention. That's a big one. Because if you don't have media attention, and I think that's really changed a lot of things the last few years. If you're not going to be on camera or on the news, you don't want to do a protest there, do you? Because nobody's going to know you did it. Which kind of makes sense. Why would you organize one if nobody's knows that you're doing it? If you can't get that message out to the people you're trying to get it out to, you ain't going to do it. So no news crews come here, unless there's a murder or something. So that's one. Economic dependence on local employers. Yep. So you don't want to be out here, downtown, small town America protesting that only has a town, that has 3 or 4 employers in town. Well, somebody's working for them. And you don't want that fringing on your employment status. And your boss could have a totally different viewpoint of what you do. And that could be negative on your employment. So that is another reason. Let's flip this coin. Yes, I write it down. I can't remember all this stuff. Geographic barriers. Distances between rural homes, lack of public transportation, and poor infrastructure make organizing in-person gatherings logistically challenging. Yep. Merle, I ain't got a ride, man. You want to go to the protest? What's it about? I don't know. Wear a mask. You don't want nobody knowing who you is. Okay, what you wearing? I'm gonna wear my blue shirt. Okay, the one with the elephant on it? No. Okay, well I'll wear mine too. All right, bye. Yep. Okay. Fewer organizing resources. Cities have established activist networks. Yes, they do. Nonprofits and experienced organizers. Are those your troublemakers there? The experienced organizers? That's what they're called? Yep. In rural areas, well, we don't got that because we got to work. We got better things to do. You know, they have jobs they have to go to. They don't have time to be out there protesting. How do these people get off work, too? They're not working. They can't be. Fear of law enforcement retaliation. Yep. You got old Cooter, the sheriff. He sees you out there protesting. He may not get you today. He's going to get you the next week or the week after. I guarantee you that's going to happen. So you don't want to be out there causing all kinds of trouble, breaking windows, stealing toilet paper, because Cooter's going to know it was you. You may wear a mask. He still knows it's you because you only got 5 shirts and he's seen you in every one of them. And he knows all the troublemakers in town. Yep. He knows who's working. He knows who ain't. So don't piss off Cooter. And the last one, apathy or contentment. Do I have to even go through? I'm not even going to read that. We don't care about half that stuff that goes on in the cities. We don't. We just don't care. We're content with our lives the way they are. And I know some of you are going, what are you going to do when some of those people move to your area? Well, you'll just have to come here and find out. It don't go down like that here. We won't put up with it. The people stick together. We ain't putting up with that nonsense. You're not going to gather in my little town. It ain't my town. I'm 15 miles out of town. But you're not going to gather there and start your northern stuff that you do, your West Coast stuff, your East Coast stuff, or your Florida stuff. You're not going to start that and go unnoticed. Now, there was a protest here, I'd say it was about 10 years ago, which this one kind of was controversial, okay. High school kids were putting Confederate flags on their trucks and going to school. And they were driving around with these Confederate flags on their trucks. And the school made them remove them. And that led to all kinds of trouble. Well, half these kids didn't even have a clue what that flag stood for, which to me, you know, I don't have a problem with it. It's just a flag, okay? But to some people, it's what it stood for. And, you know, the Civil War wasn't about, most of them didn't even think it was fighting over slavery. It was fighting over the states' rights. That's what it was. But I don't think these kids had a clue anything about the flag. They were just doing it because they were just doing it. And sometimes that's the way kids do. Kids, you know, that were too young to have any sort of political agenda. So, I don't know. But we did have a small time protest here that made the news about those flags. And from time to time, you see it happen again. If you come to the South, you're going to see a Confederate flag on somebody's porch. You're just going to see that. Some people are still, upset over the Civil War. And that's their right. But it doesn't make them bad people. Thanks for watching. Happy trails. Leave me some nasty comments. I can't wait. Here, let me get a drink out of my big. See how big it looks? See there? When I get it up to the camera? This is bigger than my head, isn't it? There's the coffee. Instant coffee. I don't drink that fancy garbage that most people buy, the big presses and all. I get a spoon and I mix it in there and it's good. That's what I drink in the Army. That's what I drink now. Happy trails.